Thank you for joining with me. We are on day 43, the real power of the mind, in the complete and annotated edition of A Course in Miracles, edited by Robert Perry. And I think I'll start with this prayer. If you'll please join me, close your eyes. I would like to pray that my will be united with thine, recognizing thy perfect love will correct for my imperfect love. I pray that I may accept the atonement with conviction, recognizing its inestimable worth and my own divine worth as part of this identification with thine. I pray that my fear be replaced by an active sense of thy love and thy continual willingness to help me overcome the split or divided will which is responsible for my difficulty with this. I accept the divinity of the messages I have received and affirm my will in both accepting and acting upon the atonement principle. Lord, here I am. So day 43, the real power of the mind. We are in chapter 2, section 10, Course Companions. Everyone experiences fear and nobody enjoys it. Yet it would take very little right thinking to know why it occurs. Very few people appreciate the real power of the mind, and nobody remains fully aware of it all of the time. It is inevitable in this world because the human being has many things he must do and cannot engage in constant thought watching. However, he hopes to spare himself from fear. There are some things he must realize. However, if he hopes to spare himself from fear, there are some things he must realize and realize fully at least some of the time. The mind is a very powerful agent, and it never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is making or creating, and always as you will. Many of your ordinary expressions reflect this. For example, when you say don't give it a thought, you are implying that if you do not think about something, it will have no effect on you. This is true enough. On the other hand, many other expressions are clear expressions of the prevailing lack of awareness of thought power. For example, you say just an idle thought and mean that the thought has no effect. You also speak of some actions as thoughtless, implying that if the person had thought, he would not have behaved as he did. You also use phrases like thought-provoking, which is bland enough, but the term a provoking thought means something quite different. 116. In the case of thought-provoking, something outside has provoked, in the bland sense of sparked, the thought. In the case of a provoking thought, however, the thought is now the cause, not the effect, and it provokes in the sense of enticing retaliation by arousing anger. The issue then is whether the thought is a mere effect or whether it is a provoking cause. While expressions like think big give some recognition to the power of thought, they still become nowhere near the truth. You do not expect to grow when you say it because you don't really believe it. It's hard to recognize that thought and belief combined to a power surge which can literally move mountains. Matthew 17:20. For I truly say to you, if you have faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is merely arrogant. But that is not the real reason why you don't believe it. People prefer to believe that their thoughts cannot exert real control because they are literally afraid of them. Therapists try to help people who are afraid of their own death wishes by depreciating the power of the wish. They even attempt to free the patient by persuading him that he can think whatever he wants without any real effect at all. There is a real dilemma here, which only the truly right-minded can escape. Death wishes do not kill in the physical sense, but they do kill spiritually. 118. Later, the Course will teach that our physical death is the result of unconscious death wishes stemming from our guilt. When this sentence says that death wishes kill spiritually, this must mean that they kill our awareness of our spirit. All destructive thinking is dangerous. Given a death wish, a person has no choice except to act upon his thought or behave contrary to it. He can thus choose only between homicide and fear. See previous notes on will conflicts. 119. A secondary meaning of death wish is the desire for the death of another person toward whom one harbors unconscious hostility. The phrase previous notes on will conflicts refers to the previous section, particularly paragraphs 6 through 11. This reference shows that fear of one's destructive wishes, which is what is being discussed above, is the same fear discussed in the previous section. This does allay guilt, but at the cost... The other possibility is that he depreciates the power of his thought. This is usually the psychoanalytic approach, 120, and that's references Freudian. This does allay guilt, but at the cost of rendering thinking impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be overly afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect it either. The world is full of endless examples of how people have depreciated themselves because they are afraid of their own thoughts. In some forms of insanity, thoughts are glorified, but this is only because the underlying depreciation was far too effective for tolerance. Footnote 121. In these forms of insanity, in other words, a person will ascribe a grand significance to his thoughts, but only as a cover to compensate for an underlying depreciation of thought, a depreciation so effective that he found it intolerable. The truth is that there are no idle thoughts. There are no idle thoughts. All thinking produces form at some level. The reason why people are afraid of ESP and so often react against it is because they know that thoughts can hurt them. Their own thoughts have made them vulnerable. 122. Because our own thoughts have made us vulnerable, we now believe in the hurtful power of thoughts and fear being hurt by the thoughts of others. You who complain about fear still produce in producing it most of the time. I told you in the last section that you cannot ask me to release you from it because I know it does not exist. 123. And that was the last section. The correction of fear is your responsibility. When you ask for release from fear, you are implying that it isn't. You who complain about... Oh, we already read that. You don't. If I merely intervened between your thoughts and their results, I would be tampering with... Sorry. I would be tampering with the basic law of cause and effect, and in fact, the most fundamental one there is in this world. I would hardly help you if I depreciated the power of your own thinking. This would be in direct opposition to the purpose of this course. It is certainly much more useful for me to remind you that you do not guard your thoughts at all carefully, except for a relatively small part of the day, and somewhat inconsistently even then. You may feel at this point that it would take a miracle to enable you to do this, which is perfectly true. Human beings are not used to miraculous thinking, but they can be trained to think that way. All miracle workers have to be trained that way. I have to be able to count on them. This means that I cannot allow them to leave their minds unguarded, or they will not be able to help me. Miracle working entails a full realization of the power of thought and real avoidance of miscreation. Otherwise, the miracle would be necessary merely to set the mind itself straight, a circular process which would hardly foster the time collapse for which the miracle was intended, nor would it induce the healthy respect which every miracle worker must have for true cause and effect. As the context makes clear, this passage is speaking of a miracle setting the mind of the miracle worker straight without his consent. Such a thing clearly would not foster a healthy respect for the fact that his own freely chosen thoughts are cause and his emotions are effect. Miracles cannot free the miracle worker from fear, 125. In other words, it is up to the miracle worker to elect different thoughts to elect the miracle. The miracle cannot just barge in, override his thoughts, and remove his fear. That would take away his freedom. He must voluntarily elect the miracle and reject the fear himself. Both miracles and fear come from his thoughts, and if he were not free to choose one, he would not also be free to choose the other. Remember, we said before that when electing one person, you reject another, 126, and that's Miracle Principle 43. Voting always entails both election and rejection. It is much the same in electing the miracle. By doing so, you have rejected fear. Fear cannot assail unless it has been elected. You have been afraid of God, of me, of yourself, and of practically everyone you know at one time or another. This can only be because you have miscreated all of us and believe in what you made. You would never have done this if you had not been afraid of your own thoughts. 127. We believe our thoughts have hurt us and made us vulnerable. We then project what our thoughts have done to us onto God, Jesus, and others, making them appear to be the destructive agents to which we are vulnerable. The vulnerable are essentially miscreators because they misperceive creation. Section 10 of Chapter 2. And I apologize, I read this ahead of time, so I do not have the Course Companion notes, the real power of the mind. However, I will read and record them Monday night with Tuesdays. No, I'll do them separate from Tuesday's reading. But thank you so much for joining with me. I love you.